Hello, friend, and welcome to the Daily Treasure Podcast produced by Mark Inc. Ministries. I'm Roberta Dosa, and we are in a series called Treasures of Faith, which is rooted in a book that Chuck and Sharon Betters wrote. Today's devotional is called Resting in God's Will, Joseph. And our faith principle is number 7, Biblical faith brings us God's peace. And today's treasure? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Genesis 50:20. The idea that nothing is important but that which is eternal permeates the life and writings of missionary to India, Amy Carmichael. Called by God to go to that country in the early 1800s, Carmichael spent the better part of her life rescuing Indian children from temple prostitution. The Dunavar Fellowship of India, the mission she founded, still exists today. Her many writings reflect the deep suffering she and her fellow laborers endured as they cared for these homeless and mistreated children. Yet, by seeing her life's work in the context of eternity, Carmichael was able to find purpose even when the suffering around her and the immensity of the task she faced seemed overwhelming. Joseph, like this faithful young missionary, also experienced sufferings that taught him to view life in the context of eternity. Though bruised and battered in this life, Joseph ended life on this earth as he had always faced it, looking forward to the fulfillment of the promises of God. When he was 110 years old, Joseph prophesied the future exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, at a time when these people had no reason to leave that country. Genesis 50. Though he had lived in Egypt for all but the first 17 years of his life, and though he would eventually die in that country, Joseph insisted that his family must one day return his remains to the land of promise, the land of Canaan. In his dying moments, Joseph continued to think of himself as a son of the covenant, a member of the blessed family of Abraham, and not as an Egyptian. Moreover, he urged his family to remember that when hard times came, God would come to their aid. How could Joseph demonstrate such deep faith in a God who had allowed him to be sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned, forgotten by everyone? How could he urge his family to take comfort in God's presence despite all the hardship he had personally endured? Joseph's story reveals a brilliant young man who, through deep suffering, was used by God to accomplish great things. C.H. Spurgeon, a great preacher of the mid-1800s, himself no stranger to sorrow or suffering, declared, "My witness is that those who are honored by their Lord in public have usually to endure a secret chastening, or to carry out a peculiar cross, lest by any means they exalt themselves and fall into the snare of the devil. By all the castings down of his servants, God is glorified, for they are led to magnify him when again he sets them on their feet. And even while prostrate in the dust, their faith yields him praise. They speak all the more sweetly of his faithfulness and are the more firmly established in his love. Glory be to God for the furnace, the hammer, and the fire. Heaven shall be all the fuller of bliss because we have been filled with anguish here below, and earth shall be better tilled because of our faith training in the school of adversity." Taken from The Shadow of the Broad Brim. The school of adversity did indeed train Joseph for great work. for Joseph would one day not only help supply the famine-stricken world with food, but more importantly, he would be used by God to provide a safe place for his family, the Israelite people, the covenant community of that day, to grow and prosper. Harsh slavery and the grim existence of prison life would transform Joseph's idyllic and easy faith, the faith of a favored and coddled son, into an authentic, pulsating, intimate faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If you know the story of Joseph, it's easy to focus on the happy ending. But as we wrote Joseph's chapter for Treasures of Faith, tears often fell down my cheeks as I considered the terror this 17-year-old boy experienced as he navigated the betrayal of his brothers and loss of his safe and honored position in his home. While we honor Joseph's faith, we do him and ourselves an injustice if we miss his deep wrestling with doubt and fear. Ask the Lord to open your heart to Joseph's story, and you will be better equipped to walk by faith wherever he places you. Oh, Father, teach us how to pray with C.H. Spurgeon. Glory be to God for the furnace, the hammer, and the fire. Heaven shall be all the fuller of bliss, because we have been filled with anguish here below, and earth shall be better tilled because of our training in the school of adversity. Amen.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us for the Daily Treasure podcast, and we are so grateful when we hear stories about how God is using this devotional to help turn your hearts toward Jesus. Another resource that we want to offer to you is Ask Dr. Betters on YouTube. My husband Chuck answers hard questions about suffering, questions that are submitted to him by people from all over the world. And you can submit your question as well. So go to markinc.org, that's MERKINC.org, where you can submit a question for Chuck to answer, or you can leave your own story about how God is using Daily Treasure to help turn your heart toward Jesus. Again, I'm Sharon Betters, and thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to being with you tomorrow.